Meeting, our last one of 2021. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls while the meeting is in progress. Please note the meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will be subsequently broadcasted on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No. Item H, the following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 4, Councillor Whitehead. Item 5, Councillors Austin, Smith and Whitehead. Item 6, Councillors Garner, Austin, Alban and Whitehead. Item 7, Councillors Austin and Garner. Item 8, Councillors Austin and Whitehead. Are there any other members requesting to speak? No. Apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Cupp, who is unwell after his COVID jab. But at least he's had it. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? Item 3, to approve the summary of recommendations and decisions of the Cabinet meeting held on the 18th of November 2021. A copy is attached to the agenda pack. I propose we approve the meetings. Do I have a seconder? Councillor David Saunders. Do members agree? Item 4, TLS KPIs Quarter 1 and Quarter 2 Housing Performance Report. To introduce Councillor Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Leader. The reports show that the team has made tangible improvements to the service since transition from East Kent Housing. They celebrate where they have done well, for example, receiving an outcome of reasonable assurance in a recent audit for landlord compliance. The improvements have been made in income management and how they have turned the capital programme around. The reports also show where performance is not where we want it to be and give actions as to how to make improvements in these areas. For example, applying focus to landlord compliance to complete fire risk assessment actions and electrical safety certificates so that they are in a position to request the regulator for social housing to remove the notice on the council. Void performance is being improved by creating a dedicated team for the area through a recent restructure. The team are making progress on our ambitious improvement plan, which will also make an impact on the team's performance over the coming year. Thank you. That's it.
Do you recommend?
I recommend that the Cabinet adopts these procedures.
Notes. Yeah, sorry, to note.
Notes.
No, sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Do I have a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Councillor Rees-Pugh. To speak under 20.1, Councillor Whitehead.
Sorry. Oh, there we are. Thank you very much, Leader. A very brief one from me. In relation to the MERS contracts, we are aiming for a 10-day turnaround on non-urgent repairs, but our June figures show that MERS are completing works in an average of 34.78 days. I understand that this is linked to many pressures, including the availability of materials, but is there anything that you think that we can do or are doing directly to reduce these figures? I'd also like to say how pleasing it is to see that we've acted directly on the need for post-work inspections and significantly raised that percentage. This has been an extraordinarily difficult period, and considering the scale of the work involved at the beginning of this process, I think all in housing should be incredibly proud of the way they have worked and continue to work together. As a perfect example of this, I would like to say what a privilege it is to be part of the Thanet tenant and leaseholder group, and to have seen how that has developed and changed over the transitional period. I'm sure that Councillor Jill Bayford will agree with me how positive this morning's meeting was, and how important it is that the communication and building of positive and growing working relationships is still continuing and becoming stronger. Housing have worked incredibly hard to create the in-house service, and I'm so glad that the foundations that we are building are this solid. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for those good words. I think we all agree with that. So it has been noted and seconded. Do members agree?
Should I respond?
Sorry, Helen. Sorry, there was an element in there. Sorry, Jill.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to Councillor Whitehead for your comments and question. Yes, I agree. The TLS meeting this morning was very, very positive, and it's a pleasure to see such improvements that have taken place, and the bond between council and tenants that is improving as we go. Yes, as you point out, there have been many pressures on Mears to complete the turnaround within the time suggested. I wonder if Ms. Porter can suggest how we think this is going forward. Do you think there's a chance that it will be quicker? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for the question. And I think all of us think that we need to see improvements in the response times for that part of the service. We have been working closely with Mears to improve our contract management arrangements and liaison with Mears contract team, and very specifically we asked Mears to consider appointing a Thanet specific contract manager concentrating on just our work. Previously their contract management structure covered the whole of East Kent, which really was a kind of hangover from the days of East Kent housing. I'm really pleased to say that they've agreed to that, and that we have our own dedicated contract manager at Mears now. The team have got regular liaison with them, and we also have regular strategic level meetings with the Mears management team, with our management team, and with representatives of the tenant and leaseholder body. And those meetings, focus on the need for Mears to improve performance in these areas. Personally, I'm optimistic that they will do that, and they have had a significant backlog of non-urgent works that they've had to work through to catch up, which has impacted on timescales. But for the future, I'm optimistic that they will improve their performance around these jobs.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bayford and Mr. Porter.
So Cabinet, we've been asked to agree the recommendations. Do we agree? Agree. Item 5 is the revision to the Local Plan Development Scheme, Local Plan Works Programme. Every local planning authority has to prepare and maintain a works programme for its local plan related work, known as the Local Plan Scheme, LDS. This is a requirement under the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. The current LDS was agreed by Cabinet on the 17th of December 2020, following the review of the adopted plan. Since then, work towards the local plan update has proceeded with a Cabinet advisory group, including members from all political groups, sitting to discuss key matters for the update. However, there have been some delays to the work programme set out in the report, and it is important that the LDS is updated to reflect the new programme. The report also considers other elements of local planning policy and whether they need to be updated. The proposed amendments to the local development scheme are set out in the report. I move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bob Bayford. Speaking under 20.1 is Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I wanted to ask 3 questions, but first of all, I wanted to welcome the renewed commitment to finding a permanent traveller site. As somebody who's been working with the group of travellers who we located on Ramsgate Port, I know that this is an urgent matter and something that they, as much as we, want to see resolved. And I'm pleased to note in the local Government Association First magazine this month, announcement about a new guide for local authorities to providing and managing sites for gypsies and travellers, which I recommend to the council. It points out that costs can run into hundreds of thousands of pounds for a local authority in a given year when there are problems, but also that delivering good housing for gypsy, Roma and traveller communities is a moral imperative in addressing significant health and inequality gaps, which have widened further during the pandemic. My 3 questions are about whether we have discretion to require that developers provide good quality insulation in the housing that they are applying to build, following our commitment under the climate provisions. Secondly, whether we can look at revising housing numbers given the fact that the population is not growing as fast as expected. As a school governor, I've been involved in discussions around that. And thirdly, whether there is anything we can do under our housing provisions to prioritise housing for people on our own housing list when developers come forward with proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I'm looking to Bob Porter with the first one, regarding the developers with the insulation.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, the answer to that, I mean, we can include policies within the local plan about our expectations about design standards. We do need to be mindful about national guidance on design standards, and obviously energy efficiency is an emerging area in terms of national guidance, but there is scope within the local plan review to include specific policies of our own about our expectations. Obviously anything that we include in the plan is subject to review in terms of viability. So if we have policies that significantly increase the cost of provision, then that obviously impacts on the ability of the planning system to secure contributions for other things that we might think are important. So in the end, it's a balance of what we think are the priorities for the area.
Okay, thank you.
And question 2, revising the housing numbers. As you know, we are constantly looking for ways to interpret the requirements. It's quite a moving feast going on at government regarding the various calculations and especially on the subject of brownfield sites. But I'm sure Bob can probably advise more on the actual statutory requirements required by central government on how we arrive at our numbers. But we are constantly looking to try and find solutions to not build everything on the grade 1 agricultural land. But if you can add something to that, Bob.
Well, obviously the formulas for calculating housing numbers are quite complex, and I'm more than happy to at another time go through that and share that with you and talk about it in detail. But in principle, the formula for calculating housing requirement is set nationally. The figures going into that are based on our own local research about population growth and inward and outward migration. Those figures go into that national formula, then sets the requirement for our local plan in terms of housing delivery. I mean, clearly the important point here is, what happens if we have a plan that doesn't meet that requirement? And I think the answer to that really is that it wouldn't, or is unlikely to get through public examination. if we put forward a proposal that didn't meet the requirements that were set out in national planning policy guidance.
Yes, I think that is something that we've made clear ongoing, is that if we don't meet our housing need, then we will be penalised by allowing developers to come in and take over the whole process. So I think it's obviously imperative we get there. And of course, the something coming to mind regarding delivering a local plan is that very well aware that the Gypsy and Traveller site must be included in that for us to pass that examination. So that is high on our list, especially in the CAG, the Cabinet Working Group. So, and I think the third question was to prioritise locals for the list. Obviously, if we are in control of the housing, i.e. it is social housing, which is very much on our agenda, then we can prioritise local families and the need for the local residents of Thanet. So what we must obviously look at the social housing and the affordable housing, which can be somewhat governed by us if we actually own or part of an ownership in the actual build scheme. So that would be obviously one of the top priorities in there as well. So very keen to bring forward a social housing plan.
Great, thank you very much.
So also speaking under 20.1 is Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Leader. This is the first time I've addressed Cabinet, so forgive me for any inappropriate slips of the tongue. There is a growing clamour from residents across the Thanet villages. As large housing developments are gobbling up the beautiful, the beloved and the irreplaceable farmland that surrounds it. Thanet is not ready for this gargantuan building programme. Our infrastructure is inadequate, our natural environment is imperilled, and our residents are appalled. I will get to the questions. In servicing existing demand, Southern Water regularly discharges raw sewage into the sea. That's not acceptable. Southern Water is a statutory consultee on each proposal, each development, each planning application, but has yet to admit this incapacity. Despite their complaints about Victorian sewers,
Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yeah.
We need to. It's about the local plan. I mean, obviously, Southern Water. I can brief you on the Southern Water, and there is some background to that outside of the cabinet meeting. But it must be relevant to the actual item on the agenda, which is about the local plan.
Well, thank you, Leader. My question is really that should we not, and will you not consider halting all approvals until such time as Southern Water is able to demonstrate a plan to upgrade its infrastructure in order to meet the needs of our existing residents and without taking into consideration the additional demand? Okay, and my second concern is that TDC just doesn't have the enforcement capacity required to handle this programme. We have an enforcement team of 2 who are effectively pitted against 17 to 21,000, and we don't have the right to stake our residents' well-being on those odds. It also seems that there are not enough good site managers available at the moment.
Again, sorry, Councillor Smith. that's a completely sort of separate entity to the actual enforcement that occurs after the building. I mean, that is a local requirement. This is actually just referring to the local plan development. So we must sort of stick to there are items that can be taken aside and discussed as on other nights, but for this particular item, we must stick to the item which is to agree the revised local plan work programme. So these are issues that are not directly relevant to the item on the agenda. So, but quite happy to have discussions with you outside of the meeting, offline, so that we can cover the areas of your concern.
I do appreciate that point, but what I was driving at, and perhaps I didn't drive quickly enough, was that the local plan must include a plan to increase enforcement capacity in order to accommodate this level of accommodation. So what I was asking was, is it not possible to consider a moratorium on approving any further large developments until such time as the shortfalls have been addressed? That's it.
Well, the short answer is no, I'm afraid. The building requirement, the numbers are set by central government. We have to ensure as a local authority to meet the requirement, and as Mr. Porter said earlier, if we don't meet that and we fail to produce a sound local plan, then we will be at the mercy of developers. But regarding Southern Water, that's an item that isn't relevant to this particular conversation, but I'm more than happy being part of I'm now on the Southern Water Task Force, which meets for the first time on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. So I'm more than happy to brief members on the outcome of that, which is to actually look at the issues regarding Southern Water and the infrastructure. But the new builds aren't the issue with the Southern Water problem. What the problem is the Victorian infrastructure that we're trying to cope with. So new builds actually aren't the issue, just to put that point straight. And as for the enforcement, I mean, that is an issue that needs to be addressed at the time when the builds happen and come about. But I'm sure that there will be sufficient planning involved with that. So it's not on neutral points, but not relevant to this particular item on the agenda. Okay. I think Mr. Porter will come in as well and add some knowledge to the answer.
Thank you, Leader. Well, two comments, really. The first one is that in planning applications, we would consult with Southern Water about the proposals for development, and the working principle is effectively that those new developments should manage their own drainage needs in a sustainable way. And our preference always would be for surface rainwater for arrangements for that to be managed on site and soak back into the ground, replenish the groundwater supply, so not add to the pressures on the drainage system. The second point really is that this report very much is about the timetable for the review of the local plan, and is recommending extending that timetable. And of course, during that extended time, we will be working with Southern Water about the drainage issues to try and find solutions and incorporate them wherever we can. So, the recommendation before Cabinet tonight is about extending the timetable so that those sorts of complex issues have got more time to be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Speaking also under 20.1, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you very much, Leader. In relation to the revised LDS, I note and welcome the report's comments relating to policy HO20, that location of suitable gypsy and traveller sites is ongoing. But considering current needs and the long-standing difficulties in locating private land, do we have any further updates in relation to identification of suitable public land to support our future timetable? Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We were discussing this the other day at our CAG meeting. We are pursuing the search for sites. Unfortunately, on the first call for sites, there was no return, but we are going to return again to it to hopefully have some sites come forward. We also re-examining our own land and asking KCC to also consider whether or not there is some suitable land that they could put forward. I don't know if Bob Porter, you'd like to add anything to that.
Thank you, Leader. I think the only thing I'd add is that the current adopted local plan includes policies about how the council would consider applications for gypsy and traveller sites. So there isn't any reason why applications for specific developments couldn't come forward in advance of the adoption of a new local plan. So there is already an adopted policy about how we would deal with any applications.
Thank you very much, Leader, and Mr. Porter.
So I believe that is the end of 20.1 speakers. So I've asked members to agree. We've got a proposer and seconder. Do members agree? Agree. Thank you, Charles. So item 6, increase provision of housing response officers at the tower blocks. To introduce, Councillor Jill Bayford.
Thank you, Leader. The condition of the council's estates causes much dissatisfaction from our residents. This has been made known to us through direct complaints, surveys conducted, and our tower block inspections which have recently taken place. Complaints include the presence of litter, fly tipping and weeds, and the cleanliness of communal areas. The residents have also told us they want to see a greater presence of TDC officers on their estates. Housing response officers are our people that work out on our estates, providing essential services such as turning Paladin bins in bin stores, unblocking bin chutes, removing rubbish and fly tipping, and cleaning and litter picking. The council does not currently have enough housing response officers to provide a service that makes visible improvements to the condition of our estates. And therefore the report recommends an increase in the budget to support housing response officers and to provide 2 additional officers dedicated to the tower blocks. To fund this report, the report also recommends a new service charge to the residents of the tower blocks to pay for the enhanced services these officers would provide. The residents of the tower blocks have been consulted on this charge, and the results show a good level of support for the proposals as set out in the report. The new dedicated officers will also bring additional benefits to the tower blocks, such as adding extra security to these estates, where the nature of high-rise living does often mean more incidents of antisocial behaviour due to the number of people living in a smaller space. The housing response officers will become a familiar face to our tenants and leaseholders at tower blocks, making residents feel safer and being someone to report issues to, as well as making a noticeable difference to the conditions of the estates. I move the recommendations set out in the report.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bob Bayford. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to welcome this strongly from the point of view of residents I've worked with in the tower blocks who very much welcome this, and just wanted to check that the responsibilities of these officers will extend sort of to the surroundings of the blocks and not just internal matters, physically internal matters to the blocks. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Do you mean the immediate
surroundings, yes.
Yes, that's certainly the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Also speaking under 20.1, Councillor Orban.
Right, thank you, Chair. I have a few things to say on this. I welcome the fact that the council wants to introduce two further members of staff to be engaged within the tower blocks. However, I would just take issue on one of the things that Councillor Bayford's just said in relation to the consultation. I find out of 455 residents, only 76 replied, and out of those 76, that's 46% of that said that they agreed to an extra charge. Yeah, I understand. I've read the report. Obviously, I have concerns that we are asking our residents to pay for two extra members of staff. This should come out of the housing revenue account, and I've read to say there's no money in there, but there is money in there, and we should be paying. You know, TDC should be providing the staff, not asking our residents to pay for our staff. We should be providing the staff. I hope that the payment for these two members of staff will be looked at. If you're minded to approve this evening, that that you will take into account that we should review this on a yearly basis, certainly for next year in relation to the budget at the housing revenue account, to ensure that these two members of staff can be paid for. Because basically what we're doing, and the report is saying, that a large number of the residents who are on benefits, universal credit, etc., oh, that's okay. Because they'll be getting this money through their benefit payment. So the taxpayers paying for it. So the government are paying for us to employ two extra members of staff, and I just find this whole thing ridiculous. So I just want to. I know you're going to approve it, but I just want to ensure that we will review this and hopefully put the money into the revenue account to ensure that our members of staff are paid for by our budget and not by the residents themselves. And again, I will just go back to the consultation and remind you again, 76 out of 455, and 46% of them agreed to this. You can't assume that all of the others are happy with it. Certainly for me, I'm speaking as a ward councillor, not as a cabinet member, but as a ward councillor with 3 tower blocks in my ward. I meet with them once a month, and I'm being told by the residents that they don't want to pay this. They haven't responded, but they don't want to pay it. They don't think that they should pay it. And also, can I just add, as far as ward councillors, that we should all be doing this. You know, we've provided our residents as ward councillors with litter pickers to go out and pick their own litter up, and also to try and take care of the planted areas and to ensure that they're kept clean. So whilst I support this double-edged sword of having the two members of staff, which is the best thing, I am totally against our residents having to pay it. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Auburn, for your comments. It should be noted that these are extra housing response officers that have been bringing them about is a result of requests by our residents about the areas of care that they are not happy with. So I think all we could do is make the consultation open to them. The fact that so few people responded was a disappointment, but there was a majority. It was also found that those that either didn't approve or didn't know were unaware of what the housing response officers did. So the ones that did support it seemed very, very sure of what the housing resorts officers did. So I really don't know what more we could have done, in fairness, and I feel that as these are extra response officers that are there to help out in a way that residents has requested, I feel it's very fair. Perhaps, Bob, would you like to add to that?
Thank you, Councillor Bashford. I think 2 points for me. The first one is what we're proposing is dedicated resources for these buildings. Service charges in themselves are not something new. We've got service charges for a whole range of different things that apply to different blocks across our housing stock. Things that are funded from core rent are paid for by our whole tenant body. And, you know, if they're paid for by the whole tenant body, they should effectively be equally provided to our whole tenant body. Where we have services that are for specific blocks, they're often funded by service charges to the residents living in that specific block. The second point I'd make, of course, is that these blocks include leaseholders, and having a service charge, it includes provision for the leaseholders to make a proportionate contribution towards the cost as well.
Do you wish to? You're okay? You're okay. So, speaking again under 20.1 is Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Leader. The role of housing response officers is vital, both in terms of building community and in helping to provide a prompt and aware service for residents. Unless you are familiar with an area and its needs, it is very difficult to act effectively. As such, I have been in support of localised officers and specific support for the tower blocks for a long time. Support for these roles has been very significant among the tenant and leaseholder group, and they were equally vocal regarding the support this morning. Residents see and know what is needed in their areas, and know just how much HROs can contribute. I may wish wholeheartedly that the budget were available long-term to cover these roles internally, but I think we also need to recognise the level of support and intervention required and the realities of the levels of central funding of housing. In support of the tenant and leaseholder group, I would like to say that these roles are important to them and welcomed. Thank you.
You wish to just reply?
Yes, just thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford.
So, Cabinet, we've been asked to approve the introduction of additional services and to recommend to full council that the necessary budget is approved for this service. Do members agree? Agree. So, item 7, Community Parks Grant Funding, Proposed Play Area Improvements. To introduce on behalf of Councillor Cupp is Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll certainly do my best, everyone. This isn't my portfolio, but I will certainly give it a crack. This report proposes the expenditure of £211,000 of grant funding for the improvement of a number of play areas in the district's parks. On November the 9th, 2021, the Council was notified of the grant allocation from KCC for community parks as part of Contain Outbreak Management funding. The timescale for this project is short and the funding must be spent by the 31st of March 2022. A project proposal has therefore been prepared at pace, and this report proposes that the funding is allocated to make improvements at 4 play areas as follows. There's Ethelbert Crescent in Cliftonville, which, as members will read from the report, attached to this agenda is the play area is currently degrading at quite a fast rate. We spend out of the £39,000 a year budget on maintaining our parks. In the last year, we spent £12,000 of that just on this play area. So it's imperative that we do our best to replace this play equipment completely and as soon as possible. With some of this funding as well, there is some funding that's left over. So we've also proposed to provide a freshen up of the steel frames play equipment at Chris Park to paint it with, I believe, galvanised paint. to help with the appearance at Northdown Park as well in Cliftonville to provide a rubberised safety surfacing around the play equipment, and then an optional extra depending on the budget, and hoping that the budget stays as it is and there's no increase in material costs. We'd also like to replace the fencing at the Memorial Ground, recreation ground in Broadstairs, with a steel fencing rather than the wooden one that has been there previously and has been vandalised. Therefore, I would like to move this report and recommend to Cabinet that we adopt and accept option 2 tonight. And I'm happy to take any questions from attendees. Thank you.
So the report's been moved. Seconder, Councillor David Saunders. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, I'm pleased to see the community grants funding of 211,000 has been made available for works to play areas in Thanet. Although I have to say it's disappointing that the government gives us and other recipients such a short timescale to spend it, or it seems lose it. This inevitably means that any time for public consultation is reduced even more than usual. The play areas identified, especially the Viking Ship Playground in Cliftonville, are certainly in need of urgent attention, and I agree that they should be the priority. Residents in Broadstairs recently benefited from the renewal of 4 playgrounds across the town there, which brought a new lease of life to the parks they are situated in. And these upgrades were funded by Section 106 money, which have been made available as a result of new housing development in the town. I believe Section 106 money has been available for play areas in Cliftonville from similar developments there in the last couple of years. So has any of this money already been spent on playground improvements in Cliftonville? Would it be possible to find out how much Section 106 money for play areas has been spent and how much is left to be spent? If there is any of this money still available, then I would hope that it could be used in conjunction with the £211,000. And this would then mean that the provisional item that you mentioned of replacing the fence around the Memorial Playground could be funded. We could sort of guarantee the funding for that, along with other playground projects in other parts of Thanet that aren't currently being considered. So thank you.
Councillor Pugh, I don't expect you have the details on the Section 106, but you might have. All right, okay.
Thank you, Leader. You have little faith in me. I will certainly do my best, but I will refer to Mike, not Councillor Humber. Unlucky for you if you were. Councillor Humber. Mike Humber. I will refer to Mike in a second for some of those details. I certainly agree with Councillor Garner. It's great to hear that there are 4 new play areas in Broadstairs and the Strandon area. I think that's wonderful. Interesting that they've been funded by Section 106 agreements. I'm sure Mike will come back and has the information. If not, we can get back to you. But what you're proposing, Mike, is particularly in Cliftonville, if there's been new developments and Section 106 funding from them is funding play areas. We've got a Green Party councillor that's calling for a moratorium on any development of any kind across the borough, across the district, and then you're suggesting that it's a good thing that we're getting Section 106 agreements to build play areas. So I can kind of see the irony there. A bit of an oxymoron, I'm sure, but I'll refer back to Mike. I'm sure he can provide the details on the Section 106 agreements in Cliftonville.
Thank you, Councillor. You're right, Councillor Garner, that and it is a very tight programme, so there is sort of very limited ability on consultation, and it's really a case of where the need is the greatest to try to try to deliver a project as quickly as possible so that we meet that funding deadline. So that's the first one. You're absolutely right. In terms of Section 106 monies for Cliftonville, I'll have to come back on that. As you correctly said, in Broadstairs last year, we delivered some parks on the basis of the Ellington scheme, Section 106. Next year we'll be delivering work at Boundary Park in Ramsgate with Section 106 money. But for Cliftonville, I'll have to come back and confirm any Section 106 funding available for that. I mean, it's worth saying that we have got over 30 parks with play areas in Thanet, and very limited maintenance budget. So those sort of that sort of grant funding is very important to maintain and improve our parks.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for Councillor Pugh's. I think he mentioned oxymoronic reply, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to add that any money from Kent County Council is gratefully received in this district. So, and long may it continue, and you spend it as fast as you can, Councillor Humber. Over to 20.1, speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. Those of us who are new to, or relatively new to this, still find it frustrating that we can't come back when somebody says something that we'd like to reply to. So on behalf of Councillor Smith, I don't think that was what she was suggesting. With regard to this item, this is extremely welcome. Very, very pleased to see good stuff happening for young people in Cliftonville, which obviously is a younger demographic than many other areas. If I can just point out that there are, as Mr. Humber has said, many other play areas in a really poor state of repair across the patch. One I've visited recently with Councillor Cupp is the one at the War Recreation Ground in Newington. And I'm wondering whether Cabinet, in the light of the limited funds available, is considering at all the possibility of any community asset transfers to local community groups of play areas specifically rather than whole recreation grounds, on the basis in particular that 100% funding can be generated from certain external bodies, for example Sport England, for certain of these sorts of facilities by community groups if the land is not owned by a local authority. But if the land is owned by a local authority, it massively restricts the funding that can be applied for. I'd be really interested in whether Cabinet is considering that or would be willing to consider that. Thank you.
Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Austin, for your question. I think that's certainly something that we could look into. I imagine, particularly with my asset property hat on, that it would be quite hard from a liability perspective to just transfer, say, a play area over, particularly the one that you're referring to, maybe the War Rec, or any play area if it's in a park, particularly if there's then accidents and insurance and stuff like that. I'm sure Mike can add some more to that, but particularly if there's potential for community groups to then access more funding than if it was technically in our ownership. And I'm sure that's something as a council would be interested in looking into. But again, I'm sure Mike will know more about that.
Mike Humber.
Thank you. I think the first thing to say is, our parks, our play areas are all inspected in accordance with ROSPA standards. So we've got a team who, their full-time role is maintaining those parks to make sure that the play equipment is safe. And obviously things like Ethelbert Crescent, the reason we're flagging that is because we've got problems in maintaining it. That's why we need to flag that up. As Councillor Pugh has said, it's something that can be taken away about transfer, but parks have been transferred. One in Westgate was transferred a few years ago to the town council. So those sort of arrangements can be put in place. But as I say, in terms of maintenance, all our parks are inspected. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I do recognise that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean also my views on certain assets being transferred into the community. Communities can come and go, whereas councils, be it district or town and parish councils, are obviously there. So I think it is more sustainable if it stays within the local government family, as it were, although maybe it is harder to access funding, but it's probably a longer term prospect if it actually remains within a town council or within a parish council. So but it's certainly, as Councillor Pugh said, something that we can look into And if someone would like to bring it to Cabinet, then obviously it can be looked at. Also speaking, I think that's it, isn't it? We don't have any more speakers on that one. So Cabinet have been asked to approve option 2 from the report. Do members agree? Agree. So the last item for the evening is item 8, council motion on notice referred to Cabinet, disabled parking spaces. To introduce, Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Leader. This agenda item fulfils a procedural requirement and refers to a motion to Council that was brought to the Council meeting on the 14th of October. The motion read, this Council commits to an internal audit of the number of disabled parking spaces available in relation to the numbers of residents requiring them, and commits to contacting and working with Kent County Council to bring forward personalised permits so that our application-based disabled parking bays can perform the role that is intended. We had 2 items on the agenda of the 14th of October. The motion and agenda item A covered this item, and the answer that we had at the time, which unfortunately for those residents who are concerned remains the same, and the response was the process for applying for on-street disabled parking bays is controlled by KCC under the normal current licence arrangement, and although we work with KCC, we are bound by their dictate, as it were, with regard to these bays. Now, these are individual personalised bays that disabled individuals can apply for to have a disabled bay in front of their own premises. There is a charge, it's £250, and the motion requested personalised permits. Well, of course, in effect, the disabled driver has a permit and it's his blue badge. The reason it was brought to the council was the fact that we do, as I think we're all sure, we are blessed with inconsiderate parkers who use the whole of the road, irrespective of the markings that may well be there. And we are being asked to work in conjunction with KCC to see if we can improve the situation, and I commit to that situation, and hopefully we can improve the situation, but I can't believe that within the legislation as it exists that we'll get to the situation where we can have named parking bays rather than disabled bays that are available for any blue badge holder, irrespective of where they are. So we are asked to note the report, note the motion, and to continue with joint transportation and our other means to work with KCC to come up with a more desirable solution to the situation we currently have. So we're being asked to note the report.
So Councillor Saunders has moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pugh. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. Actually, Councillor Saunders has answered what I was going to ask during his comments, so
I thought you had telepathic powers, Councillor Saunders, so I'm impressed. Okay.
I know chapter and verse on this subject, and
right, okay.
other subjects to do with blue badge parking arrangements.
Let's see if you've read Councillor Whitehead's mind as well. So, Councillor Whitehead, over to you.
I think possibly not. Right, thank you, Leader, and thank you for letting me explain why I brought this motion. To give context to the motion that I previously brought to Council, I will briefly, in as much as I can ever manage briefly, sum up why it was brought. It's unfortunately written incorrectly in 1.1, so I hope that this explains it further. The social model of disability, as opposed to the medical model of disability, argues that we are disabled not by our medical and physical needs, but by our environment not adjusting to those needs. In terms of our provision for disabled parking, We are currently not adjusting the environment to the needs of our residents. Under KCC and TDC provision, blue badge holders can apply for a parking spot based on their blue badge status, but that parking spot can be used by anyone with a blue badge. This means that those who are most in need in terms of mobility and access, so much so that they have been formally assessed as requiring close and direct access to their vehicle by local authorities, can and often do lose that facility, as the parking spot that is intended specifically to make their lives easier is not specifically allocated to them, making its purpose in relation to that individual redundant. We not only need to recognise the importance of disabled parking bays performing their actual function, but also assess the number of street-based bays we have generally available in relation to the numbers of our population requiring them, to ensure that we have sufficient provision. Other councils are already leading on this. Personalised bay permits are not a new policy. Hackney and Tower Hamlets and others already offer personalised bay permits to ensure that disabled individuals with limited mobility can always access their homes and vehicles without worry. I asked this council to commit to an internal audit of the number of disabled parking spaces available on our roads in relation to the number of residents requiring them, and to commit to contacting and working with KCC to bring forward a personalised permit scheme, so that our application-based disabled parking bays can finally perform the role that is intended. I am, if I'm honest, slightly disappointed by the content of this report, as it does not seem to acknowledge the nature of the motion, and often reiterates the fact that disabled parking is a KCC-related issue. But the motion in and of itself acknowledges that, and simply asks that we, as a district council, support the idea of personalised parking permits, as other councils have done, to support our residents, many of whom are disabled, as we have a significant number of disabled residents and a higher percentage than many other councils. 2.3 states that we receive few complaints regarding the usage of disabled parking bays by other blue badge users. This seems to be an odd comment, as all users of the system know via application that other blue badge holders can use the allocated parking spot. There would be no point to complaining because the system allows it, so us frequently receiving complaints regarding something that everyone knows is permitted would be unlikely. The point that I was making with this motion is that the system as it stands is not fit for purpose. If you are allocated a bay outside your home specifically because your mobility is limited, usage of that bay by another individual renders the purpose of the bay redundant, as you cannot easily access your home. Personalised parking permits solve this issue. Other councils have recognised this, and as a disabled councillor, I would very much like my council to be proactive in recognising the needs of disabled residents and pushing this issue forwards with KCC. I was contacted by disabled residents regarding this issue and asked to bring it to council. I did. I am now asking the same things of Cabinet. Understanding the rationale behind KCC's choice in not offering personalised permits is useful in terms of understanding how to change this, but I also want more from my council. Our equalities commitments read as follows. We are to advance equality of opportunity between people who share a protected characteristic and people who do not share it, and foster good relations between people who share a protected characteristic and people who do not share it. This is our chance to do so. Disabled residents and a disabled councillor are stating specifically that this system does not work in the way it should do. And as a member of this council, I am hoping very much that we choose to uphold both of the above commitments and ask KCC to do the same. Thank you.
Would you like to respond, please?
Yes. As I say, we're already committed to work within the areas that we can with KCC. I do understand the situation. You will know from the meeting of the 14th of October that we currently have 164 of the bays outside disabled residents' properties, and up to 5% of the road, street, if it's suitable, can apply for one of these bays. Yes, it's unfortunate, and I understand because I'm contacted as well, that the resident doesn't have personalised and universal use of that bay. I equally understand, having spoken with representatives from other councils, that we, as I said right at the start, we do seem to be blessed with a high number of inconsiderate parkers. Ask anyone who lives anywhere near Botany Bay and they'll tell you all about those inconsiderate parkers who take no notice whatsoever of the markings that they're parking on or near to. And yes, I would like to get to a situation where the resident has, if you like to call it that way, ownership of that parking bay, and we will continue to work with KCC to see if we can come up with a solution. But the information and the message we're getting currently from KCC is that the system works elsewhere within Kent, and it's going to be very difficult for Thanet District Council to change their mind. But as you'll hear, I can wax lyrically on the subject, so I do understand the subject, and we will continue working in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Saunders. Just to confirm, does that mean that you're putting forward 3.1 at this point?
I'm going to just clarify the situation.
Thank you.
So, yes, Estella's just confirmed that we are asked, this is for agreement, and the recommendation is that Cabinet are asked to agree the following. The Council engages with KCC on options available to accommodate all those who need access to disabled parking bays. So that is the recommendation, and that is what has been proposed and seconded, and we will agree on that now, Cabinet. We agree?
Agreed.
Okay. I believe that covers the...
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Estelle.
Okay, members and officers and members of the public, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a Merry Christmas on behalf of the Cabinet to all members and all officers, even those not present this evening. Take care and be safe, and see you all in the new year. So a Merry Christmas to everyone. The meeting is closed, Charles.
Thank you.